Good afternoon. My name is Sadie Vidrine, and I'm going to be doing a presidential campaign strategy for PPS 506. So the context of this video, as you'll notice, I'm going to be presenting a strategy within 3 to 5 minutes, so it will be brief, but a strategy for the future Kamala Harris campaign team for her run for the presidential election. As an overview of what I'll discuss throughout this pitch, I'll first start with just a little bit of a preface to provide context on some voter psychology I think is important to note. From there, we'll talk about the overall strategic objectives of the campaign and the specific lines of effort I'll propose. And then from there, we'll talk about the lines of efforts and how we can use some research, tried and tested psychology, political psychology methods, namely how we can use emotions, political heuristics, and different information processing styles to our advantage to communicate and win over the voters for Kamala Harris's election. So before I dive straight into some of the lines of effort, I just wanted to provide some quick context on voters and cognitive processes. So despite what we might think or what we might want to think, we and voters are not largely, we largely are not perfectly rational decision makers. So most of the time we're not even aware of this, it's happening subconsciously, but as we're making decisions, it's not this perfectly calculated, like we're doing the math, we're weighing every possible outcome. And conversely, it's actually driven by emotion and biases, and with that, some of our pre-existing beliefs. And so that is really important to note as we're coming up with a campaign strategy and we're doing voter outreach, that we understand how the voters think. It's very complex, but there are some things that we can do despite this to effectively communicate with the voters in our favor. So just quickly before I jump into the lines of effort, I just wanted to first outline kind of the strategic objectives. We want to first leverage emotions to anchor positive impressions early on in the campaign and to mobilize voters. Secondly, we want to activate mental heuristics to appeal to targeted demographics. And then lastly, we want to intentionally message information in a way that makes the information understandable and impactful to the voters. So starting off with a quote from a prominent researcher in the political psychology field, and I'll do this for each slide. First, McEwen et al. Emotion is not the enemy of reason, it's the driver of action. So as I mentioned, we are not these rational robots who are just acting based off of knowledge and information or factual information. Instead, we are largely acting on emotion and feeling and the way that we feel after viewing information. And so with that, we can use this to our advantage to very consistently employ emotional appeals, whether that's through advertisement, public speaking engagements, any communication from our team. It needs to appeal to emotions. Policy stances and information should be included, but it should be complementary to emotions, and it should be framed through, an emotional frame. So examples of that: targeting our base with positive and enthusiastic messaging to drive support, motivate donations, voter turnout. For undecided voters, that might look like more fear-based appeals, where we're asking them to essentially reconsider their views. Is the other candidate, are they truly looking out for your best interest? And possibly get some of those swing voters to jump ship and join our side. So moving on to heuristics, quote, heuristics are cognitive shortcuts that allow voters to make sense of complex political choices using minimal effort. So voters are relying on different types of signals to make information or to make evaluations quickly. So they're using things like political party and endorsements, demographics of the candidate, demographics of the person endorsing them to make these evaluations. For Kamala Harris, we should capitalize on this and highlight her experience. Repeatedly, we need to, to employ this messaging For example, highlight her experience. She's tough. She has the experience. She's fought as the attorney general, the vice president for issue X, Y, and Z, and she'll continue to fight for you. Frame her as like an empathetic fighter. Additionally, an example of a heuristic, an endorsement from a high-profile celebrity or a politician. So, for example, Beyonce and Kamala Harris pictured on the right. These are examples of how we can use heuristics to our advantage. And then lastly, I'm kind of flying through this, but information processing. So people don't just process political information to get facts, they process it to protect what they already believe, quoting Zoller and Feldman. So we are not just, even though we would like to think so, we're not just trying to get accurate information. We are trying to affirm what we already believe largely. And so use that to our advantage. Our base already thinks that we're the preferred candidate and we're the party of progress. We need to capitalize on that, planting positive impressions early, because research shows that impressions and emotions often outlast memory. And so they might not remember maybe the policy or the thing or the story that we're telling, but they will remember how it made them feel, and they will remember the emotion and the impression tied with that. Another example, information processing for undecided voters. So we do not like to have cognitive dissonance. We don't like whenever there's some sort of disagreement. And so the voters will try to make sense of it to get rid of that cognitive dissonance. If we can create, maybe it's through an advertisement, for example, some sort of conflict value where, the beginning of the advertisement, we're just talking about, maybe for a moderate voter or a conservative, oh, you believe in, defense, you believe in small government, et cetera, et cetera. And then we say, yeah, well, here, ending the ad, here's how the other candidate, opposes all those things. Capitalizing on the way that we process information, we might get maybe some of those swing voters on our side if we do that early enough. So in conclusion, for the Harris campaign to be successful and ultimately win the election, we must use consistent messaging that captures the feeling and intention of voters while activating their biases and presenting that information in a way which they can understand based off of the way they process information. So if we employ emotional appeals, heuristics, and then we do this in a way that takes into consideration the way voters process information, then we can more effectively communicate with them and ultimately secure their support. So that is all I have. I know I'm a bit over, so I do apologize for that. And I'm not sure if this was supposed to be a video where you can see my face. I am on a government laptop, and they are logged out from having the video, so I apologize. It's just my voice, but thank you for your understanding.